They thought it was a simulation. They joked, snorted, mocked the simplicity. Then the lights dimmed, and the feed showed ships vaporizing mid-maneuver, too fast for their sensors to track. One word echoed through the command hall: human. You've got to be joking. The snort came from Cadet Quanek of the Varik Dominion, his crest fluttering with amusement. The hologram of the Terran battle strategy hovered in the center of the auditorium, spinning gently, lines of engagement marked in red, retreat paths in blue, flanking indicators in soft white. Tell me this is satire, he added, nudging his companion. They actually called this a military doctrine? Beside him, Cadet Tylessa from the Zarn Collective smirked. Humans call it the crawfish spiral. The laughter rippled through the room. Dozens of cadets from 27 species were packed into the Intergalactic Naval War College auditorium, each handpicked for elite command roles. Most had watched empires rise and fall. None had taken humans seriously. At the front, Professor Issel clicked his mandibles together, silencing the room. This simulation is not hypothetical, he said, voice like gravel scraped over ice. It's a reconstruction. From real events. Stillness. Then a single voice, smooth and entirely too pleasant, echoed through the room. Oh, I do hope no one blinked during that part. Heads turned. A human stood casually at the edge of the room, leaning against the bulkhead with a cup of something steaming in hand. He wore no insignia, just a gray jacket, the sleeves rolled up to the forearms. Professor Issel's mandibles clacked again. I did not authorize. I know, the human interrupted politely, smiling. Major Elias Monroe, Terran Fleet Strategic Division. I'm here to give the insider's version of that little incident. Quanek whispered under his breath. That's the guy who pulled off the trap at Iota Crimson. He doesn't look like a killer, Tylessa murmured. Exactly, Quanek replied. That's what makes them dangerous. Elias walked to the center of the auditorium like a man who already owned it. He sipped from his mug, coffee, of course, and tapped the hologram. You're looking at this like a game of lines. We don't think in lines. We think in layers. He waved a hand and the image shifted, each maneuver blooming into secondary branches, then tertiary layers of deception, diversion, and fallback. It looked more like a web than a plan. And before you ask, yes. The crawfish spiral is a real strategy. But it wasn't for our enemy. It was for their observers. He smiled again. This one didn't reach his eyes. The simulation resumed. What looked like a panicked human retreat in Phase 1 suddenly snapped back in Phase 2, closing like a bear trap. The enemy's command ships were already committed when invisible Terran drones jammed their targeting systems. In Phase 3, orbital mines, disguised as salvage debris, ripped through their rear flank. Quanek's eyes narrowed. That's not strategy. That's sleight of hand. Now you're getting it, Elias replied. Humans don't play fair. We play to win. The cadets exchanged glances, some intrigued, others visibly uncomfortable. A blue-scaled Zikari cadet raised her talons. Major Monroe, why design such misleading tactics? Your opponent was already outgunned. Elias tilted his head. Because we didn't want to outgun them. We wanted them to chase us. You don't trap prey unless they come willingly. Another murmured, that's predatory. Elias chuckled, stepping forward just slightly. Isn't every war predatory? Or did you think your empires expanded by offering tea and cookies? The auditorium fell into an uneasy silence. After the session, a few cadets lingered. Some approached Elias, cautious yet curious. Tylessa stepped up, crossing her arms. You don't act like an officer. I'm not the kind that wins medals, he replied. I'm the kind that ends wars before they start. By deception? By making them too afraid to start one. Quanek walked over, eyes sharp. We thought your people were, how do you say, undisciplined. Obsessed with entertainment. Emotive. Reckless. Elias met his gaze. We are. All of that. But underneath. He stepped closer. We're apex predators who learned diplomacy before extinction. We'll smile, nod, and share a drink. Right up until you threaten what's ours. The silence stretched. Then he smiled, as if offering a cookie. By the way, nice crest. Very regal. Quanek instinctively recoiled. Back in the observation room, the senior instructors watched the footage in silence. Professor Issel rubbed his jaw. They still think this was a simulation. Commander Relth from the Dravari High Command exhaled. It wasn't. No, Issel said grimly. That footage was live, captured during Operation Emberlight. 3 fleets, gone. Before they knew they were in a trap. Commander Relth looked at the screen, where Elias Monroe was still laughing with the alien cadets. And we just let him into our war college? Issel's eyes never left the human. We didn't let him in. He invited himself. Cadet Quanek stormed into the mess hall, crest trembling with restrained fury. His claws tapped a jittery rhythm against the metallic table surface as his tray clattered down. Across from him, Tylessa took one glance and raised an eyebrow ridge. Still sulking about the human? He leaned in. That wasn't war theory. That was theater. He turned real combat into a sideshow. Tylessa sipped from her nutrient sphere. And yet, your claws haven't stopped twitching since he spoke. Others were listening now, cadets from the JYRN Dominion, the Oxari League, even a pair of wide-eyed Dullary twins. The cafeteria, once noisy with multilingual chatter, quieted to a low murmur around them. Listen, Quanek continued, lowering his voice. We've been trained on predictive warfare. Numbers. Velocity. Tactical symmetry. That spiral maneuver was random. Not random, corrected a dry voice behind him. Quanek whipped his head around. Elias Monroe stood there with a half-eaten protein bar, his smile so casual it might have been friendly, if not for the eyes that watched like a cat studying a birdcage. I heard the term random. Let me clear that up. It wasn't randomness. It was controlled chaos. He pulled out a chair and sat without waiting for permission. You people keep thinking in straight lines. You train for what you expect. But humanity? We train for the unexpected. It's not strategy that wins wars. It's adaptability. And the will to break rules when needed. The table was silent, but the message traveled fast. The human spiral was now trending across the college data feeds. The once dismissed Earthlings became a topic of whispered debate. Curious glances followed Elias wherever he walked. No longer ignored, no longer underestimated. That evening, a mandatory war game was called. Scenario: simulated 3-front border skirmish with unpredictable insurgent tactics. Team leaders: Quanek, Tylessa, and Elias Monroe. The war game began in Simulation Chamber Theta, a cavernous dome with panoramic holograms that adjusted in real time based on decisions. Elias' console was modest, just a slim control panel, a Neuralink patch on his temple, and a steaming cup of coffee that seemed entirely too Earth-like in a high-level military sim. Ready? Came the instructor's voice from the speaker grid above. Quanek snarled, "Bring it." Tylessa nodded silently. Elias just said, "Let's dance." Within minutes, Quanek's forces established rigid perimeter zones, setting up energy walls and layered defenses. It was textbook Varric doctrine, efficient, overwhelming, and confident. Tylessa was more fluid, deploying Zarn phasing scouts and sensor ghosts to disrupt signals. A mind game approach. She expected Elias to overcommit early. He didn't. In fact, he did nothing. 10 simulated minutes passed. Quanek frowned. He hasn't deployed half his assets. Is his system malfunctioning? Tylessa asked over the interlink. Instructor Issel's voice chimed in. Negative. His network is stable. At minute 12, Elias' first move finally registered. A single drone. Civilian class. No weapons. It floated directly into Tylessa's ghost field. She hesitated. This can't be serious. The drone pinged. Then exploded. Just static. Just light. No damage. But it triggered every hidden mine in her field to activate prematurely, blowing up nothing. Tylessa blinked. He just baited my defenses. With a toy. Quanek focused his forces inward, bracing for assault. Then his sensors went blind. Dozens of false signatures blinked across the board. Decoys, disguised heat trails, magnetic ghosts. His heavy artillery opened fire on illusions. Then Elias' real strike began. From the opposite direction. Drop pods. Silent. Zero heat insertion. No weapons fired. Just infiltrators planting relay spikes. Within 60 seconds, Elias had hijacked Quanek's comms grid. All Varik units started receiving conflicting orders from Elias' voice. Retreat. Reposition. Stand down. Target misidentified. Quanek roared, slamming his console. He's mimicking me. The audience watching from the glass observation deck went deathly quiet. Elias, sipping coffee, finally deployed his fleet. Quiet. Surgical. Every shot was deliberate. Tylessa had already lost 40% of her mobility units before she realized he'd been rerouting her own power grid against her. By minute 30, both alien commanders were boxed in, retreat cut off, communications scrambled, fleets cut in half by strikes they never saw coming. Then Elias sent a message into the Sims interlink. Simulation complete. Targets eliminated. Extraction in progress. The system froze. Instructor Issel stepped into the chamber. End sim. Stats appeared. Winner. Human Fleet Commander Elias Monroe. Losses. 3%. In the silence that followed, Elias stood, straightened his sleeves, and looked directly at Quanek and Tylessa. You're brilliant strategists, he said. Textbook perfect. But war's not a textbook. It's a poker game where the house cheats, and the cards explode. He gave a polite nod and walked off. No cheering. No taunts. Just silence. That night, back in their quarters, Tylessa stared at her tablet, replaying the sim, trying to isolate where it all collapsed. His timing was off by just enough to feel real, she muttered. Nothing moved in sync. It was messy, but every move was a signal. Quanek stood in the doorway. He used chaos as a weapon, he said. Like throwing blood in the water before the kill. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Finally, Tylessa asked, You think he's typical of humans? Quanek shook his head. No. I think he's the restrained one. Meanwhile, deep in the college's secure archives, a restricted file silently updated. Log entry. Elias Monroe. Behavioral analysis update. Subject exhibits advanced layered deception strategies. Prioritizes psychological destabilization before direct engagement. Threat assessment. High. Reclassification recommended. Apex class strategist. The cadet barracks were unusually quiet. Even the rowdy Zothary twins hadn't launched any noise grenades or started their floating mattress wrestling league. The only sound was the subtle hum of datapads and the occasional muttered curse from a cadet re-watching that simulation. Elias Monroe had become a legend, and a threat. Not everyone admired that. Instructor Issel paced slowly in the observation gallery above the closed sim chambers. The lights were dim. A security analyst stood nearby, tapping through classified footage with a look that bordered on disbelief. He didn't just outmaneuver them, the analyst whispered. He conditioned them. Let them think they had control, fed them the illusion. It was deliberate. Issel didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the grainy replay, Elias pausing mid-battle to sip coffee while his enemies tore themselves apart. Find his Earth records, she said softly. All of them. Military, academic, even recreational. I want to know who taught him that kind of patience. Elsewhere, in the subterranean practice chambers beneath the academy, Elias stood alone. No console. No opponent. Just a cold metal room with faint grid lines. He adjusted the neural stim link on his temple and whispered, "Run scenario 34C. Begin at step 5. A flicker of light, and he was surrounded by smoke, ash, and burning steel. A simulation of Earth, the way it had looked after the siege of Lagos Prime. He hadn't been there, but the program had been built by survivors. Too accurate. Gunfire echoed. Children screamed. The air smelled like ozone and melted circuitry. He walked calmly through it, eyes scanning. Pause. Everything froze. He crouched beside a smoking transport shell and tapped the scorched surface. "You died here," he muttered. There was no one to hear him. But his voice didn't shake. The next day, the entire college was summoned to Auditorium Hex. It was rare that a full assembly announcement was made midterm. Rumors buzzed like static. Quanek sat next to Tylessa near the front. He leaned in. "Another war game?" She shook her head. "This feels formal." A hush fell as Dean Saltran, a massive, silken-scaled Gloric with an imposing presence, glided to the center of the stage. "There has been an incident," Saltran began. "One involving unauthorized use of a Class 6 simulation module." Whispers erupted. Tylessa's eyes narrowed. Saltran raised a claw. "Silence." Normally, such breaches would result in dismissal. However, given the unique circumstances, the High War Council has chosen observation over punishment. The lights dimmed. A projection flickered into view, Elias Monroe walking alone through the war-torn streets of Lagos Prime. It wasn't a battle sim. It was a memorial run, designed to train trauma response, empathy, and psychological calibration for those entering volatile zones. But Elias wasn't reacting like a trainee. He was reliving it. The footage showed him pausing by simulated bodies, examining the burn patterns, sketching movement paths in midair with his finger, then sitting, cross-legged, eyes closed. "Note his pulse," said Saltran. "Unchanged. Note his breath, steady, not detached, integrated." The lights returned. "This is not the behavior of a cold tactician," Saltran said. "This is a soldier who maps pain like geography." After the assembly, Elias was summoned to the council chamber. 10 instructors. 9 species. 1 question. "Why did you request that simulation?" Elias shrugged slightly. "Because everyone studies victory. But no one studies failure properly." "Failure?" one Oxari mentor asked. He nodded. "That was Earth's lowest moment. We got caught. Broken. It cost us cities. But that disaster taught us one thing: how to adapt faster than we fall. Every time the ground collapsed beneath us, we mapped the cracks." A long pause followed. Finally, Dean Saltran spoke. "And why did you run the scenario alone?" "Because I don't want others learning how we think. Just yet." That night, whispers turned into paranoia. Some cadets admired Elias. Some feared him. And some wanted him gone. A secret meeting was held inside an abandoned simulation prep room. The door was sealed with anti-sensor foam. 7 cadets were present, each from a different species. Humans were invited here as part of the interspecies knowledge program, hissed a Sithari. "They weren't meant to dominate the course," muttered a Ilnari with spiked armor. "He's manipulating the curriculum, twisting the whole academy around his methods." "What if it's not just him?" asked a quiet voice. "What if it's all of them? Then we act now, before the virus spreads." No plan was finalized, but a seed had been planted. Meanwhile, Elias sat on the roof of the East Wing, legs dangling over the edge, reading an old Earth paperback titled The Art of Deception. Tylessa approached, cautious. "You know there's a bounty pool growing for whoever breaks your simulation streak." He smiled without looking up. "Let me guess. The Varik started it?" "They just offered credits," she said. "The Oxari added predictive analytics." Elias chuckled. "And you? What's your stake?" She hesitated. "Understanding. Maybe even warning. About. You're making enemies. Now he looked at her. I'm not here to make friends. Maybe, she replied, but wars aren't won by being alone. He studied her, then folded the book closed. That's a nice thought. But have you ever been the only one holding a map while everyone else walked into a minefield? She said nothing. He stood and walked past her without another word. In the shadows below the roof, 3 cadets watched the exchange. This confirms it, one whispered. He's positioning, gathering sympathy, turning even the sharp ones. Time to accelerate. Back in the council chamber, Instructor Issel watched another replay of Elias battle sims. Then opened a channel. Archive request, Earth Fleet Training Protocols, codeword, Obsidian Line. Clearance, override. A red warning flashed. Warning, this file is restricted by human command. Accessing will trigger diplomatic alert. She hovered over the authorization key, then pressed cancel. Not yet, she muttered. The Academy's internal network wasn't built for secrecy. It was built for discipline. And discipline was predictable. Easy to bend. Late one night, inside an auxiliary data vault beneath Archive Wing C, 3 cadets bypassed 4 layers of passive encryption and cracked into the protected observation bank. The security wasn't designed for sabotage, just curious students and low-level espionage. They weren't even stealthy. They didn't need to be. They were after one file. Human Cadet, Elias Monroe. Private Simulation Log 14. The footage flickered on. At first, it looked like a standard scenario, an orbital strike on a fringe colony, simulated in grayscale. Enemy vessels approached slowly, scanning for resistance. Civilians huddled in shelters. Human defenders, poorly equipped, scrambled for fallback points. Then Elias appeared on screen. No squad. No commander's badge. No overt signal of authority. But every soldier looked to him. He gave no orders. Just pointed. Adjusted their routes with a single glance. Dropped a beacon behind cover that no one else noticed. The enemy landed. And hell broke loose. Explosions cascaded, none where they were expected. The enemy's flanks collapsed in seconds. Human units moved like water around rock, retreating and advancing in ways that didn't follow standard doctrine. Then came the moment. The turning point. Elias walked, alone, into an open street. No cover. No allies in sight. A full alien squad leveled their weapons. He lifted a small, blinking sphere. The screen distorted. Every weapon misfired. Every enemy staggered, blind, ears bleeding, datasuits crashing. He didn't fire a shot. He just walked past them, calm as gravity. One of the cadets gasped. The second whispered, he hacked their brains. The third said nothing, just stared, frozen. The file ended. They made one mistake. They saved a copy. By morning, it had spread. First, just a handful of cadets. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Each reacted differently. Some were awestruck. Some terrified. Some convinced it was fake. But the footage wasn't a simulation. It was recorded training. A memory file. An imprint of something real. The Academy went silent. Even the instructors. Dean Saltran reviewed the breach in private, jaw tense, breathing slow. Issel stood beside him, arms folded. You knew this would happen, she said. He nodded once. I did. Issel pulled up the footage again. Froze it at the moment Elias walked past the stunned enemy squad. No human tech can do this. Not legally. Not publicly, Saltran corrected. There's a difference. She turned to him. He didn't just simulate a psychological operation. He lived it. Saltran tapped a claw against his own datapad. According to High Command, Elias Monroe isn't a soldier. He's listed as a strategic behavioral analyst. That's civilian code. And yet, he's fluent in breach tactics, insurgency theory, and adaptive warfare. Issel's voice dropped. He's a weapon. Saltran nodded. And now everyone knows. Cadet council chambers overflowed. Quanek stood in front of the main table, voice raised. Even if he didn't intend to share it, that kind of footage destabilizes the entire program. Tylessa sat behind him, quiet but watchful. A Varik cadet slammed a claw on the table. We train for cycles to counter bio-psy-ops, and this student walks through enemy lines using techniques we haven't even classified? He's a threat, someone muttered. He's a warning, Tylessa said finally, standing. All eyes turned to her. Look closely. He didn't kill them. He disarmed them. Disoriented them. Walked past them. Quanek scoffed. He humiliated them. No, she said, voice sharper. He spared them. That silenced the room. But the damage was done. In his quarters, Elias sat at his desk, staring at the dark screen. He'd seen the footage. He knew it had leaked. He didn't ask how. He didn't need to. A soft knock. Tylessa entered without waiting. She didn't speak at first. Just looked at him. You could have erased that file. He gave a faint nod. I could have. Didn't. Why? He hesitated, then said quietly, because they were going to come for me anyway. I just moved the clock forward. She studied him. So this was a test? No. This was insurance. Insurance against what? The Academy deciding I wasn't worth the risk. In the surveillance control tower, Instructor Issel received a new file alert. One she didn't expect. An encrypted message from Earth Command. She opened it with retinal authorization. 3 lines. Observe but do not interfere. He has not fully activated. Trust the process. Her hands tensed around the datapad. Below the message was a single phrase. This is still the peaceful version. That evening, the council made a ruling. Elias Monroe would remain, but with limitations. Restricted access to advanced simulations. Suspension from group wargames. No participation in diplomatic test programs. In short, isolated. Elias didn't protest. He showed up, sat quietly, nodded once, and left the hall. As he walked out, someone in the back muttered, "Should have sent him home." Another voice whispered, "Too late now." Back in the barracks, Elias returned to his bunk. Someone had drawn a target symbol on his pillow. He didn't react. He lay down, closed his eyes, and whispered to no one. Good. Now they're paying attention.